Welcome to Seeking the Sacred Self. I'm your host, Naomi Rozak. You may have noticed I missed a week last week. I took a trip to Louisiana and then got sick immediately afterwards. You might still hear it in my voice a little bit. But yeah, I did hate to miss a week, and it was only because you did not want to hear what I sounded like, and I couldn't put two thoughts together to save my life. So thanks for bearing with me. Today, I want to talk about how we find our center of balance when we're challenged. Because, of course, we are going to be challenged. Life is going to turn us upside down at different points. And sometimes it's just going to overwhelm us, make us a little bit unsteady. So, what is it that keeps us steady? What is it that can bring us back to ourselves? I would say that knowing yourself, knowing your true self, will keep you steady in life. And you can tell a difference in how you respond to circumstances and how they affect you when you know yourself versus when you don't. So, I want to share a little bit of a personal story about that. And mostly with this podcast, I haven't spoken just off the cuff very much. I'm still new at this. I'm still planning out episodes a little bit with a fair amount of writing and outlining just for my comfort level, but I'm going to attempt to do this just from the heart and get more used to doing that because I really do want it to be personal and something that you can relate to when you listen to it and maybe just glean a little bit of heart and encouragement from. So, as I said, I was in Louisiana about a week and a half ago for a week. The event was a wedding of one of my nieces, which is just a beautiful event and such a privilege to be able to go to and to attend. And I was really grateful to be able to do that. I took my 16-year-old daughter, Hilly, along, and we had a great time. But there's always just a little thing that comes with being with my family of origin, the family I was born into. There are some strong differences in values, in the way we shape our lives, what we shape our lives around. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And to do that, I need to share a little bit about the way I grew up. I grew up in a church called the Message of the Hour. It is not a regular denominational church that you would know about. This is kind of one that's been less well known, a little more on the extreme side of things. There were a lot of guidelines that shaped the home I grew up in. You could call them rules, you could call them principles. At the core level, they were definitely expectations of this is how we live our lives, this is how we should live our lives. And anyone who is called to be a part of this church would need to come in and toe those same lines, follow those same guidelines and principles. And for women, especially, some of the guidelines were heavier. The expectations were higher. Several of the guidelines have to do with your appearance. So it's how you dress and how you conduct yourself publicly. The women in my church, the women and girls, wore skirts that at least cover your knees, and as you got older, would come further down your legs to your ankles to cover more of your skin. None of the women or girls cut their hair at all, not even trimming the bottom of split ends. We were taught to not let scissors cut our hair, and this was honoring to God. And of course, there were reasons they believed this. They didn't just come up with these ideas for fun. It was taught to them through a man that we believed to be the prophet, a man no longer alive, but he was kind of the creator, the founder of this way of interpreting the Bible. And not only that, as I was raised as a woman, it wasn't just the hair and the long skirts. It was always expectations of servanthood, of selflessness, of giving your life up to serve others. And everyone in the church was called to do this, but the women especially do it in a particular way because they serve their children and they serve their husband in his calling. And a woman's calling then was always to be the center of the home, to be in the kitchen, to be homemaking with her whole heart. And then always in front of everything is this idea that God comes first and you serve him wholly. He comes before anything, even your husband or kids. That, church 2 or 3 times a week is the expectation. You lay your life down for what you believe to be the gospel of Jesus Christ, essentially. And so I'm not going to go into every bit of how that affected me today. That's not the focus of this episode. But what it did mean was that throughout my life, I had these strong expectations around me, and my whole family fell in line behind those expectations. They wrapped around and through our home, and we all knew what to expect without having to ask. And of course, as we grew up as children, we did ask, we did challenge sometimes, and we were just continually brought back to this line of this is what we believe, and this is what we are going to follow in our home. And remember, please, or maybe I'm saying this for the first time, I am a highly sensitive soul. I am here with a lot of tenderness and the ability to notice, to feel nuanced emotions, facial expressions, to notice people deeply, to notice their feelings and the vibrations, if you want to put it that way, of what they emit. I notice this deeply. And so through all of this childhood, I was absorbing all these things. And then you add in the divorce of my parents and how that changed how I interacted with my own inner sacredness. I cut myself off from so much of who I was and how I am in the world. And instead, I turned my attention outward to other people, to how other people were feeling, to what they were thinking. Anything that could help me to stay safe by reading the room and responding to what other people needed. So I had this lifetime of high expectations being taught into me, taught into my siblings and around me. And I bought into them wholeheartedly. This was my security. I believed that God was the answer to everything, this idea of the Christian God taught through the lens of our prophet. And it really was my security, especially after my dad left, that I believed these things with my whole heart. And it was my only way to feel good about myself for the shame that I carried deep inside of, how bad or how wrong I felt. I needed God to cleanse me of that unrighteousness. I needed his blood to cover my sin. And if you're not familiar with, in depth with Christian teachings, this might seem a little bit odd to you, but of course, sinfulness is taught along with all these expectations. You are taught that you come to the world with sin in you. And even as little children, your thoughts and feelings and desires can all be wrong, or your natural way of trying to problem solve and figure things out can be wrong. Your natural way of reacting to the world, even if you cry too loud or too long, all of that could be called sinful or incorrect. And so, from the time I was very young, I carried this feeling of wrongness deep inside. So you take the high expectations and then you take the need to please everybody and to gauge everybody's feelings and how that would have twisted up who I was to be deeply connected to people outside of me instead of to who I truly was and what I truly felt and needed. And so when I was 30, I left that church because I had gone through an awakening process, a questioning process where I felt more of what I needed and realized that I had to follow what was in my heart no matter what. But just because I left doesn't mean anything was fixed. Just because I left didn't mean I was healed, that there was no trauma there. And it doesn't mean I wasn't affected by my family at all. And so as I headed into this trip, I kind of had an awareness of I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. It felt like I was hustling a little bit, like trying to do all these tasks to prepare for the trip and even to get outfits ready that would kind of meet that line of expressing my authenticity still. I wear pants now. I occasionally wear clothes that show some cleavage. I believe that my body is just a body. It's no longer something that's primarily temptation or primarily sexual or immodest to show. And so My body is just the tool of my sacred self. It's where my sacred self dwells. And so I don't place a huge emphasis on it, and I don't not notice it or not take care of it either. But in the church I grew up in, females were especially told that they need to be very modest in their conduct and in their appearance. And so your body needs to be covered so that you wouldn't cause any male out there to have an improper, what they would call improper or sinful thought about you. So that comes with a lot of pressure, right? And I don't even own enough skirts to be able to wear skirts every day on a trip that I'm visiting my extended family. So there's not a lot I can do about that. And I have no desire to go out and buy 5 skirts or dresses so that I can toe a line for them, because that's not where I live anymore. That's not my wardrobe. And a part of me learning to be authentic and learning to be myself means wearing the clothes that feel comfortable on my body, wearing the outfits that express my style a little bit. So going up to this trip, I was feeling just a little bit funky because I was trying to put these outfits together to pack my suitcase, and nothing felt the way I wanted it to feel. And when I went into my own self-awareness, I was aware that this was because I really wanted to be authentic, but because I was choosing outfits that were just a little bit more modest, more body covering than was my norm, or maybe more skirts and dresses of what I did have, it wasn't feeling good to me. It does, after so many years of healing and working to find my authentic self, it hurts sometimes to have to suppress it. I've just worked so hard to get here, you know? But in my own self awareness, when I kind of went into the emotional energy under all of it, my own wisdom came up to say that my authentic self is the essence of what I am inside, which is the warm and loving Naomi, the kind and gentle one, the one who loves to connect with people deeply, who loves to laugh with people. And that if I focused on being my true self, the clothing was just kind of a symptom of not really being in touch with that piece of myself as I was packing. And it gave me the relief to go into the journey feeling like I can just be myself. It's not about the clothes anyway. And the more I could tap into my own essence and just let that out, it would put me at ease and probably put the people around me at ease too. So, getting back to the topic of the podcast, it's about how knowing yourself keeps yourself steady. And here's what I noticed on this trip. I noticed while I was there that the beliefs of this church bleed into everything everybody does. And please know that I'm saying this without judgment of anyone of my family or of their beliefs or of any differences between us. I solidly respect the right of every person to choose what resonates with them and to follow it. That is their sacred path to walk, their sacred contract with their own life. But remember, I'm highly sensitive. And so as I go into this situation, I'm already tired. I've been working hard for a couple of weeks to set up life for the 2 of my immediate family staying at home, and then prepare the 2 of us who are going with medical insurance and all these tasks and, TSA regulations and things like that, as well as record an extra podcast ahead of time and have it scheduled to release while I'm gone, all in a condensed period of time. So I'm tired going in. My nervous system is already a little bit frazzled. And then I'm going into a situation where there are just vibes. Vibes isn't even a word I use very much. It's just that I can feel things. I can feel the weight of the expectations, of the beliefs, and I can feel how everyone falls into those expectations without thought or without protest. And again, no shade. This is what it is, right? But it weighs on me a little bit heavily to be around it because it was something that had so much influence on my life. And when I left it, also created a lot of difficulty, a lot of relationship loss, feeling that I had lost the respect of people. There's just a lot of history here and a lot of emotional energy that has gone into a lifetime of church teaching and the expectations. So I felt that as I was with my family and as I met many, many strangers, the groom's family, all from other churches, all falling into these same beliefs, all shaping their whole lives around them. And what that means is that it's going to come up in conversation because this is their primary value. This is their fundamental thing that they shape their lives around. So it can't help but be there. And of course, there are going to be opinions that feel a bit uncomfortable for me. I fall a little bit more on the progressive side of things, and I certainly fall into the side of things of let's listen a lot and let's learn a lot before we form opinions. I can just see how children are raised to do this without question, in kind of the actions that they do, how they prepare for church, how everything is shaped around church events. I feel the weight of that. And then again, being a highly sensitive person, I require a lot of downtime. I need a lot of time to just contemplate, a lot of time to be by myself, to process all the things that I've thought and felt, all of the information, sensory information and other that has come into my body through a day. So this was a super busy week. There were 3 or 4 days full of wedding events where I met friends from 20 years ago who I'm not really in touch with anymore. There's no friction, but there's not a lot of affinity either, simply because our values are so different and our lives are so different now. And so it can be hard to find something in common to talk about. It can be hard knowing that I'm the outside woman. I'm the one who left. I'm the one that, even if I'm treated well or tolerated, or even people are kind to me, I know that their belief in the back of their mind still dictates that I am fallen, I am sinful, I am wrong, or I am just wandering in the world until I find my way back to God. And I don't want to guess at what they're thinking. Everyone's different. And yet, that is the teaching, that when you leave it, there's something wrong with you. And so I also feel a little bit of the weight of that wrongness. It's not that I believe it, but I feel the weight of being seen that way. And so what it comes down to is that's a lot for my nervous system. The busyness, the constant input, the fact that I was also, sharing a room with my teenage daughter. We were often visiting with people till late at night, and then it starts again first thing in the morning. And there's a lot of getting ready for events, a lot of introductions to strangers, some uncomfortable clothing. In the end, I did feel very comfortable with the clothes I chose to wear, but I'm not much of a dress up person either. And so dressing up even a few days in a row feels a bit taxing to me. What I came away with was a lot of nervous system jumble, a little bit of jitteriness. How I felt in my body while I was there was, this is just a lot. This is a lot. It felt like my body was full up to the top of my head with impressions and feelings and things I'd picked up in the rooms. And this happens without me trying. It's not like I'm trying to read a room automatically. This is just who I am. I absorb things, I notice things. But what was interesting was, by the time I got to the end of the trip, it's been 7 days or 8 days, and I knew I was a little tired, a little worn out, and that my body definitely needed some downtime to process all of this stuff. And because I was so jam-packed with unprocessed things, or with sensory information, it felt like, oh, I'm going to have to go home and process a lot of this. But it was really surprising then to me to get onto the airplane at the end of my trip and open my journal. And I wrote a couple of pages of, writing out the things that were inside me, just releasing them out of my body. And then there was peace. And I thought that was interesting because over many years, ever since I left the church, anytime I would spend even a short period of time, even an afternoon around my family, or a couple of days, not to mention a full week, there would be things that were said that were triggering for me. There would be things that came up that I really did have to sort through. I had some feelings over, and I had to go away and think, how do I feel about that? Why is that not sitting well with me? Is this a conversation I should have with that person? Or I would just feel unseen or unrespected, not wanted. I would feel that pieces of me weren't fully acknowledged, like, the work that I do with people, the healing, the passion that I have to work with people so that we can all heal ourselves from the inside out. Those are pieces my family doesn't talk about much with me. they don't hold in general. There are one or two who maybe I talk about it a bit more personally with because we've built that relationship and I still don't share it all. You know what I'm saying? The same way they wouldn't come and share everything they think about God with me. There is a difference there and we all feel it and we try to hold as much space for each other as we can. And then there are times when there's just no purpose to go into something different. But as I thought about it on the airplane and I was thinking, okay, I need to prepare this next podcast episode, this was what struck me is that I could spend a whole week with my family and with only one quick journaling session to release some of the effects of what was in my body. It wasn't even deep processing. It was only putting into words a few things that I had felt and a few things I was noticing now and a few things that wanted to be said to myself that I was at peace. And I realized that this is because I know myself deeply. I know myself well. And even while I was at my sister's house in Louisiana, surrounded by family, and even though it felt like I was a bit out of touch with myself because I'd been working hard for a few weeks and I hadn't been able to do as much self-care and things like that, even in those moments, I could say, I know I'm okay. This is only a brief period. Or even if I picked up an impression from somewhere, I could say, this has nothing to do with me. I have my own path. It's okay, you know? And so when I walked away from it, I didn't have so much to have to work through in my mind. I wasn't re-triggered back to a trauma from childhood or previous times with my family because I've done the work of knowing me, of healing so much, of knowing who I really am and what I value. And the more you do that, the more it gives you space to let other people live their lives, value what they value, and you get to love and trust and hold space for yourself. So I just want to share a little bit of what this would have been like a few years ago. When I was 20 and spent a lot of time with my family, I was still in the church. And the Naomi I was at the time would have felt great and secure on one level because, look, we're all the same. We believe the same. We are shaping our lives the same way. But deep down, I carried that shame of, I'm not good enough. I compared myself to my siblings a lot, how I measured up in my homemaking. Actually, I didn't have kids and I wasn't married at that age, but say anywhere from like 20 to 28, this would have been my reality of I'm not good enough. I was insecure. I was overthinking. And then I would just feel like I didn't measure up to, especially my sisters and who they were. And I would have felt bad about myself. And then when I was 30, right after I'd left the church, I didn't have a clue about who I was. I had lost now all my religious identity, which had shaped me from the time I was a toddler. And I felt so much discomfort crawling up the skin of my back at the idea that my family couldn't respect the choice I'd made and that I'd lost so many relationships. I would have felt defensive with my family. At that time, I felt like I was fighting for emotional oxygen. Sometimes I put on makeup and it felt like I was putting on a protective shield just by doing that. It was a way of saying, without saying, I object to what you're trying to put on me, whether they were or not. This is just feelings I had inside, right? I felt like I had to defend. I felt like I had to make statements. If they had made offhand comments about their own beliefs or their own observations about, something Christian in their life, I would have taken it personally if they made it in front of me because I felt so unrecognized in the choice I'd made. And then at 35, I was starting to heal. I was getting better at calming my nervous system. I knew myself more. So I wasn't going into complete fight or flight if they were in front of me and saying something, but I could still feel like the protestation bubbling up inside me. I was learning to be me, but I was still tiptoeing because I didn't know how to show up fully, authentically, vulnerably in that setting. Maybe my outfits were a little bit more authentic, and I was learning to be more a part of the conversation. But a lot of the hurt still felt very personal. It wasn't all healed. It still isn't all healed. It's just layers of it don't get triggered very easily anymore. And so I couldn't be my biggest, bravest self back then. And I still cared very much about what people thought. And I was just growing, putting out little feelers, learning to become myself, learning to do things like breathe, just take deep breaths whenever something triggering would start to come up in a conversation with my family and learn that, oh, like I don't have to be offended by this. I don't have to be reactive. I can just listen a little bit more. I can have my own feelings about it and I don't have to judge them. I can just listen, like I was starting to heal and starting to regulate my nervous system. And then now at 40, there's just peace. I know now that what goes on around me does not reflect anything about who I am or how I'm valued. Even if I have feelings, it's not necessarily true of how they perceive me, right? Of how others are looking at me. And sometimes I do fall into a glitch or a trigger. And all that means is one little tiny piece of myself wants to be healed, or one more little piece of myself wants to feel at home. Like I said, when I was preparing my suitcase for the trip and trying on clothes, I had that little thing come up of like, oh, I just want to be authentic. And I almost resent feeling like I can't just wear what I want on the trip, but I do want to be respectful of my family's standards and not be like totally out there in my clothing. And then the wisdom that helped me feel more at home was to know my authentic self is what comes out of me, not necessarily what I put on my body. And that was the soothing I needed to feel at home and to feel confident going into that situation, right? One of the beautiful things about knowing yourself is that when you're in a situation that's inauthentic to you, or not necessarily one you would choose, or where you're surrounded by people with different value sets, is that it's only your job to take care of you. Because my job was just to be me, and it's not up to me to measure someone else's response or sort through their feelings, especially if they're not expressed to me. I can just be myself, and that's all I'm responsible for. I can show up with confidence. It doesn't matter what somebody else is thinking or feeling. I just need to and get to be me. I accept myself and I'm comfortable in my skin, my choices, and my clothes because I have thought about all of these things. I have put so much time and effort into knowing myself that another person's opinion or response or reaction couldn't change how I feel about myself. And truthfully, what I did feel was a lot of love from people. I didn't feel a lot of censure. There's a little bit of like tolerance. They can look at me and know I'm a worldly woman. I'm not a church woman. And I can feel that. But I also felt that there was a lot of effort put out to make me feel at home and to kindly accept me as, like, one of the sisters, one of the aunts. And what else can you take that as but kindness, right? So, what I wanted to stress by telling, the story of the last week, but also how I would have been 10 years ago or 5 years ago, is that knowing yourself takes time. You are going to change over time, and your knowledge of self will not happen in one day. But in any one day or one period of time, you can gain great self knowledge in any area and be so much better off because of it. In this journey of getting to know yourself, I see it as a spiral path inside of you, where with each turn you go a little bit deeper into who you are. And at the same time, while you may be going deeper, the path circles back to things you've come across before. The healing goes in deeper layers, the knowledge goes in deeper layers. At one time, I knew I was somebody who had left the church, and that was all I knew. At one time, I would have defined why I left a certain way. 5 years later, I know I left for a completely different reason, a more heartfelt reason. I know who I am, and now I see, oh, that woman back there who made that choice, she didn't know everything about why she made that choice, but she was going on something in her heart. And now I know my heart so much better, and I know why my heart made that choice. It knew there was so much better for me out there, right? And I trust my heart so much more now. I can hear it speaking so much more easily, and I don't need to explain reasons for doing things because I just believe what my heart says. So you see, there's that difference how we respond in a situation when we know ourselves versus how we would respond when we know less about ourselves. And I want to quickly address why this journey of self knowing takes so much time. Well, there are a few reasons. And the first is that there may be things to heal, because as you dig deeper into the real you, there will be blocks and beliefs and shame and resistance that comes up. And you can't really know yourself deeper or get where you want to go until you work through what the blocks and the shame are. We've named some of these and we looked at them more closely in the last episode, Understanding Resistance and Blocks. I had a shame about, because it was taught into me that leaving the church is wrong. And even though I don't believe it for real with any part of my being, the teaching lived in my body and has a response to it. And so until I healed where I felt wrong for leaving the church, of course I would feel like the wrong one around my family. And now that I've healed that, and I don't think that was a wrong step, I'm solid in my reasons for leaving and in how good it's been for me. They could think that I'm wrong. They could believe that with every fiber of their being, and it still wouldn't affect me because I know me. I know that I'm not wrong. I know that I'm not bad. And then a second reason why knowing yourself will take time is that some parts of yourself you can't know until you're in relationship with other people, until you show up as part of different groups. There may be a time in your life when you're more isolated or you're doing a lot of healing work on your own. And there will come a time when there's a limit to how much you can grow until you begin to practice where you've healed and the skills you're learning with other people. There are parts of yourself that respond to other people that need to express needs and wants out loud, and parts of you that learn things like boundaries and self respect and respect for others and things like that. And parts of this will also change over time. You'll grow and mature, but in some cases, you will shift in and out of relationships and shift in and out of your needs. And that's just a process of time, right? That learning just happens over time. And then some parts of yourself need practice. If we go back to identifying needs and learning to express them, this won't be easy if you were someone who has been out of touch with needs. I definitely didn't know my needs. I didn't know I had them. I didn't know how I had a right to have my needs met. And some of them were huge because they had gone unmet for so long. So it took me a couple of years into the healing journey to even be able to express needs to people in my life. And I also knew what they were long before I was courageous enough to be able to say them out loud. Some of that stuff just takes practice, feeling into the need over and over again, practicing the kind of thing that you would say to somebody if you're asking them to meet that need. And maybe you're practicing it quietly in front of your mirror or murmuring to yourself as you take a walk before you get brave enough one day to say it out loud to them, right? And then we just need to allow for change and for deep layers of understanding to come over time as we get to know ourselves. And we wouldn't know ourselves well if we didn't start at that beginning layer and allow ourselves to get more time and experience. When I first left the church and with my family, I felt very unseen and unheard and disrespected and judged for my choices. It felt like my skin was being flayed from my body. That's the emotional sense I got of being around them, how uncomfortable it was. And I felt petrified at showing up to family events with my new changes in appearance and things like that. I did it anyway, but the fear was all the way through my body. And then as I healed, I learned to see myself and to heal myself and to become more alive and active in relationships, to share more of myself. And I had to practice doing that first with people who felt really safe, like my husband and my kids and a couple of very close, trusted friends. And then I could branch out further to extended family and social media people and things like that. It took a year and a half from the time I learned I had needs and needed them to be met, like specifically in my marriage, before I was actually able to open my mouth and ask for them. And during that year and a half, I had to work into my self awareness over and over and learn to really feel what I wanted and learn how my inner self would want to put that into words. And then, truthfully, some of the changes in relationships and over time came when I simply could not tolerate being small and quiet and unseen any longer. It got to a point where I felt like I have to speak out because not speaking out feels absolutely intolerable. I cannot live like this anymore. The time is now. Because I so desperately want to feel really connected to people. I don't want to live feeling alone and small and unseen anymore. And so now it's time to act. So, as we heal, as we experience life and keep digging through the layers, we know ourselves more, and then our needs will shift. And then we reflect some more and can meet the new needs. But there are always things, whispers, clues, calling to us, asking us to take one little step further. It's like a siren call, something in the blood just a hint on the wind asking us, what if? What if we take this one little step? What if we try this one little thing? What if we could get over our fear and be brave and say what we need to say just one time? What if we could be vulnerable? What could be possible then? And we will never know what could be possible until we take that one step. Then the energy around us and in others all has a chance to respond to that step, and it all reshapes to become a new possibility that we can now engage with. With my family, if I had stayed prickly and defensive and silent and offended, relationships would not have been very good for the last several years. And believe me, it did take time, both on my side and on the other side. But what I noticed was that as I got more comfortable with myself and I healed and I didn't take everything from them personally, it felt like in response, they were able to relax. So now that we know it takes time to get to know ourselves, let's talk about what getting to know ourselves encompasses. Like, it's a broad idea, right? Are we talking about a hair color or decorating our house, a certain style of something? Or are we talking about career and relationships? Well, it's all of these things. Getting to know yourself will involve your likes and dislikes, all of them, your needs and your wants, physical, emotional, mental, your values, what you stand for, what you need to see and feel in relationships and in your life, what you want to shape your life around. Values are so important to identify. Your interests, what you like to do with your time, what kind of articles you like to read, what activities you like to fill your time with. Your identity, both the parts of identity that shift. And then there are always core, unchangeable pieces of us. My sensitivity to the people around me is unshakable, unchangeable. It just is who I am. And I embrace it now and I love it for what it gives to me. And I know where to fortify it for the areas where it can be difficult. I give myself lots of time to process things because that's what my sensitivity requires. But other parts of me might have shifted over time. I would have said at one time that the church was part of my identity and part of what shaped me, and it was a big part of my story. And even though it's what I focused on here, I no longer feel like my story was a story of being raised in the church and then leaving a church and how the church affected me. For sure, it affected me, but the story I tell myself about my life now is the story of how I lost myself, which was only partly due to the church and partly due to trauma and partly due to personality and how I respond to things, and then how I found myself again. So the church is 10% of my identity now, or how it affected me is such a small piece compared to what I would have said 10 years ago. And then getting to know yourself is also your physical body awareness, your awareness of how different things make you feel in your body, what your body likes and responds to, and how to work with your body. And we are all much more unique than we would think sometimes. And then getting to know yourself is also what fulfills you and how you find purpose. But why is it important? I feel that knowing yourself is everything. A person that doesn't know themselves will live incongruently. They will commit to things they don't want to. They will fall into addiction and overwork and mind-numbing activities and unhelpful relationships. They will live reactively, feeling out of control of their feelings or life, which can move into blaming or harming others or themselves. They won't know why they behave the way they do, or they can't change their behavior when they want to. They will feel unhappy or dissatisfied and not know why. And they will struggle in friendships that don't feel good and not know how to untangle themselves. They won't know how to have healthy boundaries or what their boundaries are. And they will wonder why they feel the way they do. When you know yourself, you get to have some beautiful things to support your life. You'll know your boundaries and values, which, by the way, directly influence each other. And this will allow you to choose relationships that resonate with you. You will know how to feel fulfilled and satisfied which will influence the activities, the people, the way you play, the lifestyle that fills you up based on the values that you have. You won't be at the whim of your emotions. You won't live a reactive life where you feel out of control and it's everybody else's fault and other people are always doing things that make you upset. That's what reactive is. It's where you don't know how to be in charge of your life. No judgment here. It's how I lived for sure. I simply didn't have the knowledge of how not to feel reactive. It always felt like everything was happening to me and out of my control, right? But when you're not at the whim of your emotions, when you know yourself deeply and you've healed places that have come up in your knowledge, and when you've been able to give yourself the care and attention and healing you need, then you'll have a life where you know and feel in charge of what comes up inside you, your triggers, your needs, all of it. You won't be making other people responsible for how you feel in your life, but you can invite others in to help care for you when you need it. And you'll know how to treat yourself and others respectfully. As you get to know yourself, you'll also increase your empathy for everyone around you and for how you respond to them. I have talked about this really briefly in the episode called Not This, The Undoing, How to Know What You Want. I just want to ask, how would you get to know someone new, someone you might want as a friend? You spend time with them. You ask questions. You tell stories. You have some fun together. You try some old and new activities. You practice relationship and communication. And when you're not with them, you think about them, who they are and how you click together. And then sometimes you wonder if you said something or did something that went too far. Did you offend them? And then you might want to apologize or follow up just to see how deep your relationship goes so the two of you can get closer, right? And then to get to know yourself, it's the same thing. You sit with yourself. You spend some time together. You ask yourself questions. You reflect on the past, on the stories of your life, and the meaning you draw from them. And for me, this might have looked like sitting with a journal and literally saying, when did I feel the best in my life? What activities were the most fulfilling? And then answering them. But this can also be when you're washing your face in the morning and you're looking in the mirror and you just start thinking, what do I love the most? Who do I love the most? What has felt the best to me? And just reflect on those things. And the more you do that, the more you will pull in the pieces of life that are meaningful to you. And then, just like with a friend, you try some new things with yourself and see if they feel fun or not fun. And sometimes you offend yourself. You cross your own boundary or needs, and then you're like, whoa, self, that was not okay. We can't do that again. That definitely didn't feel good. And suddenly you know yourself better. You talk to your inner self, encourage yourself, cheer yourself on, and be gentle with yourself, just as you would your best friend. And know that wherever you are in the journey of knowing yourself, we all have the ability to be self-aware in our own way. We all have a starting place, even if we have cut ourselves off from certain feelings or memories, even if we have fear or uncertainty, even if we feel we're starting from the very beginning. This ability is built into you, and it takes less than you would think to be able to start building this self-awareness, this self-knowledge. And the things you know about yourself now are enough to get started. The relationship you have with your body now and your feelings now and with others now is exactly the place to start. So I just quickly want to talk about some tools, as I mentioned from episode 3 of the podcast. And the first would be that you want to reflect and ask yourself questions or use prompts like, when do you feel your best? With whom do you feel your best? What were the most fulfilling moments in your life? Who has loved you in the way that felt best, and how did they do that? How do you like to wake up in the morning? Do you like routine or spontaneity or a mix? What foods make you feel good or gross? Take notes, write them down. What kind of underwear feel good on your body? Literally, no piece of information is too silly or too small. All of it will build this big, beautiful picture of self-knowledge that will guide you for the rest of your life. And then as the next tool, test different things and note how you respond. Different environments, relationships, activities, interests. Note how you feel before. Do you dread them or do you get excited? And then how do you feel during? Is your body feeling good? Your emotions, do you feel overstimulated? Do you feel energized? And afterward, do you feel like a good exhaustion, or do you feel built up, or do you feel drained, or a mix? Just note how your body and your emotions respond to all the things you test and try in your life. Notice if your body shuts down, if it gives a ooh kind of response, or if it opens up and gets excited and wants to do that thing again. When I see clients, I often give them a ballpark for if they want to come back for another energy healing session or a sacred self session. But what I tell them is listen for your body response. Your body knows what it gets out of these sessions, and it will tell you when it's time to come again, or if it's time to come again, or even if it wasn't for you. Just trust your body. Let it tell you about what it wants and doesn't want. And then use these reflections and the tests that you tried to make different choices next time, to try different actions. Or if you got the response that something was good or felt good for you, do it again. Build more of it into your life. Use the first bit of information to make a new choice and then see what the response is again. Over time, you will gain this encyclopedia of knowledge about yourself in all areas. 10 years ago, I could have only told you a few things about me, especially in that devastating period just after leaving the church when it felt like my whole world was upside down and I had to get to know myself in a whole new way. And now you name an area of life or me, and I could talk for 10 minutes. I mean, I've talked for a whole podcast episode, right? This is just a time process. And then lastly, build trust with yourself by following up on all the information, making choices that honor the information you've gained. The more you show to your true self that it is safe and listened to and respected and honored by responding to the information it gives you, that means physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the more you will have the capacity for when challenging things happen and the resilience to rebound and to encounter tough things and not be completely thrown off. When something goes crazy in my life, or maybe I just have an intense period of stress, it is going to be stressful. It is going to affect my body, my nervous system, my emotions. But I also have been through enough times and gained enough support that I know what to do to be there for me, even during the stressful period. And then afterwards to recover, I know what I need and I give my body that. And so then the next time it's in a stressful time period or a challenging thing, it trusts that I'm still going to take care of it no matter what. Or eventually, even if I can't get it to that day, it knows this is just a short time period. Things always get back to normal. And that's part of what you do when you know yourself and you respond to what your body is telling you over and over. It trusts that it's being taken care of. And it responds back to you by feelings of wellness, of well being, of satisfaction, of fulfillment, of being well nourished and settled in life. And I just want to share one last thing. Part of the reason I'm sharing the personal story today was for how jumbled up my body felt in the last week by how much information was kind of stuffed inside of it and not really dealt with. I would have thought there would be a stronger response coming out of it, or I would have had to process things a little more deeply, but I didn't. And that was a surprise to me, a beautiful surprise. And another way I've been surprised in the past, say like 2 to 6 months back, is how much more of myself there has been to discover, even after years of actively getting to know myself. How many new things are still inside me that are just coming to the surface. There is so much more clarity coming in, so much more vision of the potential I have inside, and so much strong desire to go in one direction or another. An opportunity or choice will come up in front of me, and I seem to know immediately whether it's something I resonate with or not. The feelings in my body are so strong and clear that it feels really amazing, but it wasn't always this way. And even after practicing knowing myself for so long, I'm finding things that surprise me, that fill me with this sense of adventure of like what else could be possible. And they also ring so true and so right and so clear inside of me that it fills me with a lot of delight. For so long, it just felt like I needed to consider everyone's opinions and everyone's perspectives, and then all my logic and the facts and the concrete side of, what my thinking was telling me, and then what is the moral right or wrong of any situation. And having so much jumbled up inside is very stressful on the nervous system. And I felt always that strain of overthinking, of trying to consider all the things. But now that I know myself, my sacred self, how good and true and connected and wise she is. And I've tested this connection to her and I've built this trust over time. I know that I can trust her. I can believe what she says and I can hear her when she speaks through my body. And now I can use my body response as a guide. She is never wrong. Sometimes what comes up is simply information to digest. For example, if I have a resistance to something, if my body is telling me no, it doesn't mean don't do that thing. It might simply mean dive into the resistance, feel into it, see what's happening, and then I have more information and I can decide what to do. And then other times my body leaps at something like an event or an opportunity so strongly that I don't even consider the amount of money needed for it or the amount of work it will be. Sometimes I'm even scared at the vulnerability it will take, but my body is giving me such a strong response that I just commit because it doesn't lead me wrong. And I've learned that that excitement inside of me is my signal of this is meant for you because it's what we want to do. And that's been built over thousands of moments in the past 8 years or so of listening to my body, trusting it, building the trust. And the more I practice going in the direction of what my body tells me, the louder it speaks and the more confident I am with it. And so now when I'm plunged into a challenging situation, let's say an important conversation or conflict where my internal radar is screaming at me, I listen to it and let it guide me out of the situation or guide me to communicate or whatever I need to do. And I can feel the different parts of me speaking. I can feel my nervous system saying, ooh, we don't like this. This is uncomfortable. And that's okay. And then I can feel this quiet observer part of me saying, yes, the nervous system is uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's just information. Let's watch what's happening and listen to our body so we know what to do. And then my intuition will come up and say, yes, this is uncomfortable, but I sense that something is coming. It feels like even though this is a hard conversation, it feels like there's a truth about to come to the surface that will be really good for us and for that other person, no matter how it comes out. And then I can wait for that moment of truth that helps the relationship move forward. And I can make a choice based on what I know about myself. If my thoughts or feelings feel really muddy at that moment and I don't have clarity, I know that I can ask for more time to come back with a response. Or if I don't understand the other person's perspective, I can ask more questions. I don't have to feel stuck, uncertain, shut down, or frozen, or any of those things. And if I do feel them, I can say, I feel a bit stuck. I don't feel like I'm processing this very well at the moment, and I'd like to take time to calm my emotions and get back to you. Knowing yourself gives you the opportunity to hear from your own self what you need and to practice meeting that need. If it means time to pause, time to rest, an ability to make a certain choice, a way to express yourself, or permission to go a completely different direction in life than everyone around you. It's knowing yourself and trusting what yourself says that will guide you through the uncomfortable and challenging moments. And it will also move you in the direction of the most fulfilling, connected, and wonderful moments. Knowing yourself keeps you steady. Knowing yourself is everything. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you could take a moment to rate or review this podcast on your podcast app, that would mean a lot to me. It really helps the podcast find new listeners. And I hope you will join me next time as we go a little deeper again.